Thank you so much for being with us today. We are just jam-packed with programming, news, and information and things that we're going to be sharing with you today, to include a discussion about reparations. And I know there have been times where I've made a few statements, but I haven't really gone full bore. And today is the day we're going to get there. We're going to actually have that discussion here on the show. Thanks, due in no small part to, this is an interview over at Reason Magazine that I saw on YouTube. And I got to say, for this guy to be, he calls himself a upset Democrat, a liberal Democrat, the points that he makes, John McWhorter, on reparations and what we're seeing in the conversation surrounding reparations, they resonated with me quite a bit. I'm totally opposed to reparations because I think the conversation on race has been so fraught, and it's gotten worse. It's not on the upswing, even though interactions with people from different ethnic backgrounds are fantastic, like on the personal level, anecdotally. And then if you look on surveys where people talk about how, do you get along with your neighbors? Do you get along with your coworkers? Do you get along with people in your surroundings? And for people who have, what the left has convinced us to call a diverse group of people that they interact with, which I just call that life. If you're interacting with different kinds of people, or maybe you live in a segregated area and you're not, that's your life. It's not something that you intentionally set up. But this is something that over and over again, we're finding that people are fine. People are getting along. Yes, people are going to people. But for the most part, Americans are working together, living together, eating together, pumping gas together, shopping at the grocery store, going to the soccer games and the basketball games and the track meets, and doing life together. And even in the most segregated areas, church on Sundays, people are still finding ways to reach out to those who, quote unquote, are different than themselves. And I kind of hate that too. Like when I see someone saying, I like to reach out, or I have often had liberals tell me, I enjoy the fact that I'm able to interact with people who are different from myself. And that liberal lives in the same neighborhood that I live in. Our kids go to the same school. But about the only thing we can find different, because they're married, I'm married. We have sometimes the same number of kids in mostly the same grades, driving similar vehicles. Pretty much everything is the same. The only thing they're doing differently is they're either not going to church or they're going to a different kind of, worship experience than I'm doing. So 90% of our stuff is the same. But because I'm permanently tan, they're patting themselves on the back because they have interactions with me because I'm different. So I think that it goes to the core of this whole discussion about reparations, how we see each other, how we allow certain groups to shape language, and how when we hear people talking about this, my encouragement is just to don't get angry, don't get upset. Instead, try to listen and then unpack all of the parts of the conversation that have to do with this. It's an ongoing national effort by about 30 people. Some of them have PhDs. Some of them have written numerous books. Ta-Nehisi Coates has written a book. He drives the conversation on reparations. He has forced it as a wedge issue in for the Democrats, where they're literally using it as a litmus test. If you want to be someone in the Democrat side who's courting voters, you have to say you're for reparations. And so I think it's important for us to talk about it. But I think we have to be real about it. Some of what we're seeing is a desire by some people to say, you know what, fine, let's just do reparations because that'll end this. And when we get into the discussion, I think you're going to see that if you think about this logically and just listening to what Dr. John McWhorter was saying, and he's a liberal. He's a liberal Democrat. He has been characterized as a Republican on occasion, or a conservative or a right-winger, because he holds a couple of views that are divergent from the Democrats. But he's an Obama voter. He doesn't like Donald Trump. He thinks people that voted for Donald Trump have different priorities than he has, and he recognizes their right to do that. But he also looks askance at people like me who voted for Donald Trump. What I'm saying is, yeah, there's a conversation to be had, but I don't think it's the one that the Democrats are trying to lead. And so I want to have it today on the show. I want you to call in 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037, not so we can argue about, the reparations issue per se, but that there's a pattern here. And until we can see and recognize the patterns that are presented to us by those who have opposing viewpoints, and then unpack those patterns so we can actually, point by point, rebut what they're trying to get us to do, to remove their ability to sit on high in judgment of the rest of us who don't want reparations. They're judging and saying, well, that stems from bigotry and racism, which I'm not sure how that works for me since I'm permanently tanned. But there are things we can actually say during a discussion about reparations that can cause the other person to think about it, and maybe they don't change their mind, but armed with that information, it has to be that they're going to go forward logically, or, as we have seen with many people, they will just continue to parrot and repeat the same things over and over again. They won't care about whether or not the conversation is logical, but that frees you up to then say, hey, shaking the dust, that's not something I need to worry about anymore, because you've done your best there, and it frees you up. So I'm into that. I'm into, if someone seeks me out to have a conversation about this stuff and I present some facts and they're not willing to even hear the opposing view, I know that's not a fruitful conversation to be having. And I also know, based upon what, just if we go by what the Bible says, but we're going to unpack this from that side, but we're also going to talk about it from the side of Dr. McWhorter didn't present any kind of Christian or biblical or religious viewpoint at all. Just talked about it from the perspective of someone. He's black. He happens to be married to someone who's white, and he has mixed race children. And he even talked about that a little bit, but we're only going to circle around the reparations issue. We're also going to have Carmine Sabia on, political and cultural commentator. He's going to join us to just chat over the current events of the day. But before we go into, and that's next segment, and then we're also going to listen to a smidge of audio from Shep Smith, who, again, on the French church, the church attacks in France, he's not willing to even listen to the idea that a rash of church attacks, the Notre Dame fire being the 13th, that somehow could possibly be a pattern. Not blaming anybody, you don't have to try to drum up evidence where there isn't any. We're not tinfoil hat wearers, but is something going on? So first thing I want to do is hear, the president had a brief statement that he made about the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. And for my own part, I actually visited Notre Dame Cathedral back in high school. We had a trip that we took, as it was, you could sign up for it. If you paid and signed up, you could go. And it was London, Paris. That was the name of the trip, London, Paris, because we went to London, England, and Paris, France. And it was probably one of the best trips I've ever taken in my life. I still remember so many parts of it. It was such a vivid experience because I was off on my own without my parents, just a couple of chaperones and a couple of teachers, and then a small group of us. And I remember going into the Notre Dame Cathedral, and when you go in, everybody speaks in hushed tones because the cathedral itself is so, it's so enormous. It really makes you feel small. And the sound, if you have more than 2 or 3 voices in there, the way it's built is to amplify sound so that when people sing, it gives you a heavenly experience. And really, if you don't know much about Notre Dame, you should read some of the things that people have written. First of all, it took about 150 years to complete, from the moment they decided we're going to build this cathedral and they were designing it to completion. And it was done before cranes and, pulleys and all of that. It was just human effort. And it was the introduction of the flying buttress. It's just an amazing piece of architectural wondery. But also, the people who built it wanted to glorify God and lift him up and say to him through this building, the design of it and its size and its architectural functions, that they would glorify God, that the building would glorify God. And so it is unbelievably beautiful on the inside. And like I said, it just makes you feel really small. And we went in, of course, when you're on a tour, you're in a little group tour and you have someone leading you through. And she started speaking in hushed tones. And when we first started talking, we could hear the low kind of sound of our voices, because it was almost like if we spoke low, our voices stayed low to the ground. But if we lifted up our voices, it would echo up into the up, stories tall to the roof. And so it was just, it's indescribable. It's one of those experiences that you want to have, which now some arsonist or ne'er-do-well has robbed so many people of that experience until the French are able to put it back together. And they're saying it may take 30 years to put it back together. amazingly, a cross on the inside of the building was untouched, but the roof has burned off. The two bell towers are still intact. One of them, they're worried that it might collapse because the roof is gone. Not sure what's going to happen there. But here's the president. He had some words to say about the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. It's number one.
The fire that they're having at the Notre Dame Cathedral is something like few people have witnessed. When we left, we had a whole group of your great representatives, and when we left the plane, it was burning at a level that you rarely see a fire burn. It's one of the great treasures of the world, the greatest artists in the world. Probably, if you think about it, I would say, Jovita, it might be greater than almost any museum in the world, and it's burning very badly. It looks like it's burning to the ground. So that puts a damper on what we're about to say, to be honest, because that is beyond countries, that's beyond anything. That's a part of our growing up. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of our lives. That's a truly great cathedral. And I've been there and I've seen it, and there's no cathedral. I think I could say there's probably no cathedral in the world like it. It's a terrible scene. They think it was caused by, at this moment they don't know, but they think it was caused by renovation. And I hope that's the reason. Renovation, you know, what's that all about? But it's a terrible sight to behold.
So I want to make a correction. I said it took 150 years. It took 182 years to build the process of building it. The construction of the cathedral began in 1160 and took nearly 2 centuries. While most work was done by 1260, it was finally completed, wholly completed, in the year 1345. They have a crown of thorns there that is believed to have been placed upon Jesus Christ during the scourge, and it contains also a piece of the true cross and one of the nails used in the crucifixion, plus relics of many French saints. Of course, it's a Catholic cathedral. It's not actually owned by the Archdiocese of Paris. Due to France's laws regarding secularization, the French government owns all churches built before 1905, including Notre Dame. The government lets the Archdiocese of Paris use the building for free and will continue to do so in perpetuity. Of course, the Archdiocese of Paris is responsible for the upkeep of the church and for paying employees. Notre Dame is the most visited site in Europe with 12 to 13 million visitors annually, and it has been destroyed before. In World War II, nearly all of the glass in the church was broken when Paris was bombed, and Huguenots destroyed icons and statues during the 16th century. Also, Notre Dame was ransacked and rededicated to the goddess Reason during the French Revolution. The building itself was used at that time for wine storage, and the church actually resumed use of the building in 1801. Now, I'm not Catholic, but this is definitely a blow to Christendom. And I saw that ISIS was celebrating, and I know the French are so sensitive about their immigration policies that they won't show us any video of the no-go zones, whether people there were celebrating the burning of the church. But we'll unpack some of that as well, discussions on all of that. We'll have Carmine Sabia up next. Stay right there.
On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, we took the spices that we'd prepared and we went into the tomb. We found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When we went in, we didn't find the body of our Lord Jesus.
Who took him? Where is he? Who took him?
Why do you look for the living among the dead?
Where's Jesus?
He's not here. He has risen.
Jesus was alive.
He's alive.
Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, mocked, beaten, and then crucified on a cross for sinners like you and me. the Son of God was buried, and after 3 days, he rose from that grave. Urban Family Talk encourages you to rejoice in the glorious reality that our God is a living God.
Up next, Carol Swain with 2 minutes to think about it. From poverty to professor, from GED to PhD, a bold Christian speaking truth to power. Here's Carol with today's 2 minutes.
If you're like me, you're fed up with the leftist tactics. We have the Mueller report. The president has been cleared of collusion with Russia to win the 2016 election. You would think that the president's haters who pinned their hopes and desires on his being arrested and walked out of the White House in handcuffs would have gone away quietly. You would be wrong if you expected them to show the decency to do that. No. They are up in arms again with another conspiracy theory. This time, it's about Attorney General Barr. He only released a small summary of the report, as if the average American would want to read the entire 300 pages. The left now argues that the redacted form is hiding something. Really? Peering over the shoulder of the Attorney General through all of this redacting was Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Rod, Rosenstein, who's no fan of the president, is not one that would have allowed the president to get away with anything. This 2-year collusion delusion, the flight of fancy of the president's haters and their media buddies, is quickly coming in for a very hard landing.
Learn more about Dr. Carol M. Swain and help support her ongoing work with your tax-deductible donation to Be the People Project at carolmswain.com. That's carolmswain.com.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on afr.net or urbanfamilytalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there. Welcome to the program. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button over at stacyontheright.com. You can also find out more at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. As we're advertising on our slides, we are having the Marriage and Family Life Conference, which is happening down in Tupelo, Mississippi. And there will be a lot of fantastic speakers there. You won't want to miss it. The comments on Facebook are lighting up, and I think it's a good thing. You know, we welcome all of it. So it's my pleasure to welcome Carmine Sabia. He's the political and cultural commentator, writes all over the place. So good to have you with us, Carmine.
Hey, Stacy, how you doing?
You know, I'm actually a little on the sad side because of this whole Notre Dame, you know, the cathedral burning and the news that ISIS they've been celebrating what few of them are left after the complete obliteration that President Trump has been dealing to them. And just the overall idea that...
It wasn't just ISIS celebrating.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I wasn't sure. Let's go there. I kind of have a feeling that if they'd had video cameras allowed in the no-go zones in Paris, France, they would have seen a lot of celebrating there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you make of yesterday on Shep Smith on Fox News of all places? He had someone on from live from Paris, France, an official from there who was trying to squeeze into the interview the fact that this isn't the first church attack they've had. Over the past year, they've had 12 attacks. A bunch of them happened in the last week, which this is Holy Week, you know, leading up to Easter and the Resurrection Sunday. And Shep Smith cut him off.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by that at all. It's typical Shep Smith. Shep Smith belongs on MSNBC. Listen. If you think this was an accident, I got a bridge to sell you. I'm sorry. I don't care what the French say. A fire, and this is what I got so much for yesterday on Twitter, I'm sure you noticed, a fire burning that fast on an 800-year-old cathedral that's never had an accident like this before, burning that fast and that hot that it could do that kind of damage in that amount of time with no accelerant. There was nothing. And then you look at stories that they caught people with propane tanks there in 2016. They thought it was a test run for a terrorist attack. France as Glenn Beck said, and I'm not always the world's biggest Glenn Beck fan, but Glenn Beck said it, and he got a lot of heat for it today, but he's right. And what he said was, if it was a terrorist attack, France is never going to say it. And I believe that.
Oh, absolutely. No way they're going to say it, because they're afraid of the ones they've allowed to immigrate into their midst, and they've changed the actual, like the way Paris used to be. It's the city of love, a city of romance, very, very clean, and a tourist destination that anyone from anywhere in the world could come to Paris and find people walking the streets who speak their own language, not just French. French people speak multiple languages, and also find that they could go into the shops and things and really have the Parisian experience and have it for a week, a month, 3 months, whatever you want to do, and then leave and have that as something that you experienced. And the French aren't changed. You're changed by the experience, but they had a kind of longevity to the way that Paris itself has been seen. Just decades and decades and decades of the same thing. People sitting in the afternoon drinking espresso, women shopping, and the idea that anyone from anywhere around the world could come there and experience and share in what Parisians call their everyday lives. And that's been utterly changed by the crazy immigration policies that they have.
And here's what I say to that. I was talking to a friend of mine from England yesterday, and he's a liberal, and he's, let's kumbaya and give peace a chance and hug and kiss. And he's a kid. He's young. He's my friend's son. He's like 19. He's not a kid, but he's a kid. And I said to him, and you can't say this in public because, oh my God, can you believe Carmine said that? He's a white supremacist. He must be a white supremacist. But I said, let me ask you a question. I said, and tell me if this makes sense to you. I said, you go to Japan, Singapore, China, India, Pakistan, Iraq, any country in Africa, any country in the Middle East, any country in Asia, nobody says a damn word about diversity. But you go to any white country on this planet, you need diversity. You need more diversity. You need more diversity. Nobody's saying Japan needs more diversity.
Well, they actually have very little diversity in Japan. Their country is very homogenous.
Well, I'm saying, no other country is asked to have diversity until you go to a white country. And then you have to have diversity. And not only do you have to have diversity, you have to have diversity to the point where you can't even vet the people you're letting in. So I consider America a white and black country, thanks to, unfortunately, slavery, the reason for it. But it's a white and black country. That's who's been here the most, right? And then we're asked to bring in all these people from other countries and other cultures. Now, those of us that have been here, my people aren't here that long. We're here, I'm Italian, so we're here like 100, 150 years, maybe 200 years if you want to go back. But if you go back to the Anglo-Saxons and the Africans were here the longest, right? So that's the culture. And when we came, we assimilated to that culture.
Right.
The French assimilated to it. The Germans assimilated to it. Everybody from Europe that came here, we assimilated to the culture that was here. Now the people that come here are like, no, we're coming, and you assimilate to us. And it's lunacy to me how this is even a thing. Imagine if I came to your house and I'm like, yeah, Stacy, I know how you like to cook dinner, but this is how we do it in my house, and that's how I expect you to do it.
Right. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's like, and it happens on the mini scale, like you just described, where I actually read a story about a couple who had someone. She called herself a refugee. She was from Mexico. She was living with this couple, a white couple, and they're Americans, and she was living with them. She's not a refugee. I'm sorry. She was calling herself an asylee, someone who was seeking asylum in America. And she was staying with them because the couple were like, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. Everyone always says people who support open borders and, freer immigration never do anything. So they invited her into their home. And she got angry after being there for about 3 months. She got angry that the lady one morning made eggs and red beans and rice. So she was making like a mixed breakfast, some American food, some what she considered to be ethnic food. And she might have made it, if you think about it, because you know how we Americans love our different ethnic foods. She might have made it because that's what she wanted for breakfast, but she made it for everyone, including this grown woman who was living with her. And the grown woman beat her up so badly that they had to call the police, and she was arrested. This woman had lived with her for 90 some odd days when she beat the stuffing out of her for not making the breakfast that she wanted. And I'm still unclear as to what it was she should have made. Like, what did she put it in order? What, I mean, how did this go so wrong? There's so many stories.
Ham or any kind of bacon?
Thank you. Hello. Because if it had been me, I would have said, I'm sorry, why are you still laying around waiting on breakfast? If you're living here for free, at first thing in the morning, you ought to beat me out the door going to work. When do you start working? You know, you're here, you babysitting kids, you mowing people's lawns. What are you doing to earn your keep while you're here waiting for your asylum request to go through? We have the wrong idea.
My brother often says to me that cemeteries are full of stupid people.
Well, I mean, sure, but play stupid
in
games,
other
win
words,
stupid
people
prizes.
Who made ridiculous mistakes.
Yeah. So how can we stop it here, Carmine? Because I'm a little weary of. I read all the stories. I'm up on what people are doing, and people are going to do stupid stuff. I don't care where you're from. You can be a refugee. You can be an asylum seeker. You can be a born and bred and dyed in the wool American with an American flag pin and tie and all that. You can do stupid stuff. The question is, how do we advance? Because I think it was a combination. It was answered prayer. A lot of people I know were praying that there would be something done about that stupid ruling from last Monday by that Ninth Circuit judge who said you can't turn asylum seekers back to Mexico to wait on their claims. And then the president said, well, if we can't turn them back, we're just going to send them to sanctuary cities. And all of a sudden, 3 other judges on the Ninth Circuit said, wait a minute, we've convened a panel. We're going to hear your case right away. And also, you can send them back to Mexico real quick. We'll give you that emergency injunction. So how do we do more of that? That was an excellent move by Donald Trump. I think it was like divine, a shock of like, this will work. And he tried it, and it totally worked.
Stop playing games.
Yeah. So how do we stop playing games?
Take the gloves off.
Okay.
Did you see the panic attack Cher had over the refugees coming to?
It's kind of delicious.
Coming to Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was kind of awesome.
Yeah, all of a sudden she sounded a lot like us.
She sounded like she and I go to lunch together. Like she sounded like one of my lunch buddies here. And I mean, I was like, have we met? Are she and I like? Because for a second I thought, is this you, Cher? Can't be you. Can't be.
It's my friend Cher. All of a sudden,
right.
What's going on?
It's my best
Look,
spot.
It's really easy to virtue signal when you're not the one that has to do it. You know, it's very easy to virtue signal until it's you that's asked to make adjustments and changes to your life. Listen, we're Christians. I want to help people who have legitimate refugees, seeking legitimate asylum. First of all, we all know, anybody who paid any attention knows that the vast majority of asylum cases are bogus.
Bogus. Yeah.
They're just a way they get in the country. I say the word asylum, they have to take you in. What do you get asylum from? Not getting a job? That's not a reason to get asylum. If you can't find a job in your country. That's not an asylum reason. Also, the asylum laws would dictate they would have to apply in Mexico first. People don't point that out.
Right.
There's so many things people don't point out. And again, I talked to my brother a lot about this stuff, and we were talking about, I don't want to get sidetracked. We were talking about the Mueller report this morning, and it's going to be a redacted. CNN must have said the word redacted 1,000 times today. And I want to just say to them, I wish I was one of the Republicans on the air to be like, okay, well, Mr. Tapper, can you name me a report in the past 200 years that hasn't been redacted? You're acting like this is a new thing. Every report is redacted.
Everything you get from the government is redacted. Look at Judicial Watch and all the FOIA requests they've submitted, and they sue to get the information, and they get 500 pages, and 300 of the pages are fully redacted, nothing but black lines, and they have to pay for every page.
The media acting like this is some new thing.
Not new.
It's happening for this report, and they're just being so dishonest about it. But because I definitely want, I'm sure your listeners already know, but I want people to know that this is not uncommon. This is how it's done. But getting back to your question, how do we do more of this? You got to let the president be the president. These people, his handlers that try and make him do things this way and that way, it's wrong. The sanctuary city threat was a brilliant idea.
It was great. But I don't want it to just be a threat, though, Carmine. I know there's just been one little tiny inkling where he said, we still might have to send some there anyway, even though the injunction. Me too. I do too. I actually think he should do it in a very systematic, methodical way, like he just throw the numbers of people that have to be distributed onto a spreadsheet or a database, and let one of those people who wears a pencil behind their ear, even in the computer age, put it into a chart with all of the different, not a chart, but a database with all the different sanctuary cities, and then distribute them out and start the buses to rolling, start the planes rolling, military aircraft so we can absorb the cost through our defense budget as opposed to paying for commercial flights, and send them, drop them the same way they've been doing to all of the red states and the border states. They've been doing this for 20 years now or more. Now it's their turn.
They want to change the demographics of red states.
Yeah, and we're as if we don't see it.
Let's not make any mistakes. That's the purpose.
It is, but it's time to start fighting back. As it just infuriates me that so many states now have, like, if you look at Michigan, where Ilhan Omar is from, Ilhan Omar would not be on all of our televisions, just basically like chattering like an empty-headed nincompoop. We wouldn't have to listen to her if we hadn't put all of the refugees from Somalia and different places like that in one location. And they didn't ask permission from Michigan. They didn't say, hey, Governor of Michigan, can we put 88,000 refugees from Somalia here? They just started bringing them in. And they got with the churches and cooperated, and the churches were like, oh, we're here to help. What can we do? Before you know it, they've got this huge community that sent her to Congress, and now she's there with her headscarf of oppression. She hadn't learned anything from being a refugee, and she's saying the kind of things that I never thought I would hear from a congressional representative in America. Right? Anti-Semitism. That's something that we as Americans, we've never stood for that. We've gone to war to fight for Jewish people's right to exist.
Anti-Americanism too, really.
Yeah. Absolutely, because Jewish people are Americans as well. Yeah.
But I mean, no, it doesn't Jewish people. She talks anti-Americanism. I mean, her dismissal of 9/11 as something some people did. And then, it's not just against Jews. You talk about yesterday when she's talking about Notre Dame like it's a museum and not a church. It's just the disdain for our way of life from her is palpable. And so, I mean, again, what you talk about is change demographics. Like I told people, Democrats play the long game. They're not worried about the Republicans. We think short term. So we say, oh, they want the illegal aliens to vote. No, they don't. I mean, they're not against it, but that's not the game. The game is get the illegal aliens here. The illegal aliens are going to have kids who are allowed to vote. Okay, that's the long game. And you basically create a one-party system in this country. Let's lower the voting age to 16. Let's get rid of the Electoral College. Let's do everything possible so we're Republican and never win again. But they do it, and what they do is they say the most outrageous things today. When you hear them say, let's lower the voting age to 16, that's outrageous today, right? But what they do is they'll just keep talking it for the next 10 years, and in 10 years, it won't seem so outrageous. They did it by, let's do gay marriage. When they first came up with gay marriage, people were like, that's outrageous. Now, people got used to the idea. Well, Hollywood helped them do it.
Of course. But you just brought that up. I don't know if you saw this story. They've got protests going on, girls protesting. They're leaving their high school because you remember the Obama administration is the one that put up, they changed the rules saying that if someone says, I feel like a girl, they have to be allowed to go into the girls' bathrooms. Well, girls are now, teenage girls, not their parents. The girls themselves are doing walkouts in their high schools to protest it. And the point that you just made is the one they made. We didn't know when we supported LGBT that we'd be fighting for the right not to go to the bathroom with a boy or change clothes from gym with a boy. It's kind of unbelievable. I love it when you come on and we have our chats. Carmine, Sabia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacy.
All right, talk to you again soon. All right, when we get back, we will have some more about the church attacks. We will also talk about Bernie Sanders whining about getting called on the carpet about being a millionaire by Think Progress and how the Center for American Progress is cleaving off from their own people like internecine warfare. It's going on. Get your popcorn, baby. We'll be right back with more after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
I'll be honest, sometimes I fight that tendency to allow my tongue to have its way. It's easy to say, oh, you're crazy, or that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Hurtful words can be painful, no matter who they come from. But when they come from your spouse, the person you love the most, they can hurt even more.
And when they do, here's the key thing I want everyone to hear. I have to go to Lauren or the kids and say, I shouldn't have said that. I was wrong and I'm sorry. When you can acknowledge your failures, say you were wrong and apologize, that's the sign of a winner in my book.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Just a Minute with Stacy Washington. It's no secret that many of America's public schools are a disaster. In public school, teaching grammar school kids about transgender sexual habits, making them practice witchcraft using Ouija boards, indoctrinating socialism, and many other things have parents at a loss for what to do. Enter the Copy Committee. The unsung heroes of grade schools across the country are the moms who spend a couple of hours per week copying worksheets and handouts for the teachers. This job isn't glamorous or particularly time-consuming, and it's not exciting, but it is a great way to make a friend out of your child's teacher and get your eyes on every sheet of paper your child sees. We cannot assume our public school isn't engaging in these practices. Your child is in enemy territory, and you have to act accordingly. Monitoring the school can be a partnership with stay-at-home moms if you're a working mom. In other words, make it happen. I'm Stacy Washington. Find out more at stacyontheright.com.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Everybody's really under shock now in France. I would tell you something. It's even if nobody died. I mean, it's like a 9/11. It's a French 9/11, you know, and it's a big shock. I mean, this church was there for more than 850 years. Even the Nazis didn't dare to destroy it. And you need to know that for the past years, we had churches desecrated each and every week in France, all over France. So, of course, you will hear the story about the political correctness, which will tell you that it's probably an accident.
Sir, we're not going to speculate here of the cause of something which we don't know. If you have observations or you know something, we would love to hear it.
No, I'm just telling you something. What you need to be ready.
No, sir. We're not doing that here. Not now. Okay. Not on my watch. Okay. Felipe Carcente, it's very good of you to be here.
So Shep Smith over at Fox News cuts Felipe Vicente off because he's pointing out that this isn't the first church arson, vandalism, acts of vandalism, etc. He was just trying to say, look, your media is not covering this, and they're not. I posted the only story I could find about the other church burnings that's not on a right-wing website. So Breitbart's been covering it. Other news sites on the right have been covering the burnings, Jihad Watch, etc. Even something happening in a church, and I believe it's in South Carolina, where they busted out the stained glass windows and wrote, "You will submit to God through Islam," in black spray paint on the outside of a white church. That's here in America, guys. That's right here in this country. But I have people on here. I posted, I'll read you. It's a very short post. The story is from Newsweek.com. It's the only one I could find that has anything to do, like a list of churches being desecrated across France. The title is Newsweek.com, Catholic churches have been desecrated across France, and officials don't know why. They actually blame it on secularists and the pressure is coming from the radical secularists and anti-religion groups, as well as feminist activists who tend to target churches as a symbol of the patriarchy that needs to be dismantled. That's their opinion. My opinion is that it's connected to Islam. I have no proof. I don't know. So my opinion about it doesn't mean that I'm some huge news organization. I'm going to have to retract something later. If they say that it's some anti-religion secularist or some atheist who did it, doesn't change the fact that the other churches were vandalized. Now, does it? I would have to see the end of the investigations into all of the church vandalism that has occurred before I would definitively say none of it had anything to do with Islam. Do you see how that works? So I have people on here who are a little ticked off that I put that down. Did you even read the article? Of course I did. But that's my opinion. My opinion differs from that of Newsweek. I mean, how is that shocking? So I think what people are doing is everybody's all up in arms and ready to start like, well, you're upset because the church is burning and you're worshiping Notre Dame, or people are on there arguing about whether or not, the way that Catholics practice their religion and all that. I'm not here to argue about Catholicism. I already know that Catholics practice their religion differently than Protestants do. I'm aware. That's not what I'm here to argue about. I'm not here to argue about anything, actually. But this whole idea that we're going to get off onto these tangents, you're worshiping a building. I guarantee you I'm not worshiping that building, but I have memories there that are distinct to me as a person that are triggered by, not triggered in the bad sense, but triggered by this event, seeing the building again, seeing the people outside it yesterday, as the fire was unfolding, singing Ave Maria, remembering, because I've been to Paris, France 4 times in my life. So I'm remembering all the different trips I took there, and some with my family, some with school. And I'm just thinking about the whole experience and how much France has changed due to immigration. So this is not, this isn't about worshiping a building, and it's not about arguing about Catholicism. It's about the fact that a lot of churches have been vandalized. A lot of them. A lot of churches. Why haven't any mosques been vandalized? Why is it just the churches? Why is it just these historically significant churches? I posted the other stories on Facebook, by the way, if you want to take a look at them. You can see them. You can head straight over to Breitbart. They have a whole list of different churches that have been destroyed. So I'm not going to get caught up in the minutia about it. I think it's really instructive. If you want to know something that we should get caught up into, is that Shep Smith over on Fox doesn't want anyone to talk about the other churches that have been damaged. That was a prime opportunity he had there to speak to someone who actually lives in France and get their opinion. And he could have said, these churches have been vandalized and it's your opinion that it's connected to one thing or the other, or that it's connected to this one at Notre Dame. What evidence do you have? He could have allowed the man to speak. Now, I know how it works. Someone's going to say, well, you didn't allow so-and-so to speak. I get it. I still think he probably could have allowed this guy to share what he had to say coming from France, someone who actually lives in France. He was able to get on the show to talk about it. He chose not to. That's his right. So I want to give out the call lines again, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So this story about the Center for American Progress throwing Think Progress under the bus. So first of all, if you're not familiar with these organizations, we're talking about a liberal think tank called CAP, Center for American Progress. Now, Soros funds them. A bunch of Hollywood stars and rich liberals fund this organization. And I'm not saying that because it's any different on the right. Rich conservatives fund our think tanks, and they have small donors. We have small donors. It's the same on both sides of the political aisle. But just one person said he wanted to destroy the American economy the way he did in Great Britain many, many decades ago, and that's George Soros. So that's the difference between him and, say, the Koch brothers, who actually worked to build up the American economy. But I don't want to get too far off on a tangent. So in a Saturday letter addressed to the Center for American Progress Board of Directors, 2020 presidential candidate Bernie Sanders was whining about Think Progress's coverage of his campaign. He said he was being subjected to unfair political attacks. Unfair personal attacks. Now, before you get out your tiny violin and your teensy-weensy wine bottle and your little miniaturized block of Gouda or, some kind of fancy truffle-based cheese, understand that the only reason he's complaining is that they called him on the carpet about something that he has regularly discussed, which is millionaires and billionaires. Remember, I played some audio of him saying millionaires and billionaires. He's been saying it for decades. Well, now he only says billionaires because he himself is a millionaire. He's actually worth more than $1 million now. Now, I don't begrudge him that. Y'all remember, for me, when I bring up the people's income or their wealth status, it's only to point out that Bernie Sanders could give away 70% of what he has so he could stick to what his mantra is, which is rich people should be taxed at 70%. But what he said on his little town hall last night to Martha McCallum was, you make more money than I do, you do it. You give some of your money away. Do you see how that works? So until he's an actual billionaire, and then he'll say trillionaires, because he's never going to give any of his money away. He's earned it by writing a book. He says a fantastically popular book. He says he wrote a good book. Now, I don't know about that. I haven't read it. I'm pretty sure it's not good because it's full of falsehoods and lies. But the point is, a lot of people bought it. Who knows if they read it? They bought it. And so now he's a millionaire. And so now he's no longer concerned with millionaires. Thank God. I know a lot of Americans are like, whew, all right, I'm off the hook. Bernie Sanders isn't coming after me anymore because he's a millionaire too. The best thing that could happen to America right now is if Bernie Sanders were to suddenly find a few 100 million more people who wanted to buy one of his books, catapulting him into the status of being a billionaire. If he could somehow have a couple of his properties be worth $1 billion or something like that, that would make it possible for us to then no longer be shackled with Bernie Sanders trying to vilify people for their wealth. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway, so back to this story. The video notes that Sanders dropped his trademark denunciation of millionaires and billionaires after making his first million. Now he only talks about billionaires. There's an article that was written by Think Progress. Now, these are organizations that attack organizations like ours, American Family Radio. And they do so because they don't want to see, religious-based organizations making an impact. They don't want to see freedom of speech on the right. And they're especially upset by the truth-telling that goes on that debunks all of their wildly unpopular and unsuccessful ideas. And if you want an example of what their wildly unsuccessful and unpopular ideas are, just go to any inner city in America, the closest inner city near you, check down the list of people who are elected and see if it's not run by Democrats, and then visit the public schools, K through 12, check out the matriculation rates, how many kids graduate on grade level, how many kids go to college, how many kids can pass the ASVAB to get into the military, and then come back to me. What's the tax base like? Are the properties worth enough to support the city? Is there a huge and overarching debt that the city is carrying that they expect the suburban neighbors to pay for? Just look at what Democratic rule actually does to areas, whether it's huge cities or huge states like California, and then you'll see the rampant unsuccess. And when I say unsuccess, it's not just unsuccessful. It's failure on a scale that does not comport with the actual country that we're in. We're in America. It's possible for anyone, a person who's homeless and living in someone's basement or someone's car, to go to high school and graduate valedictorian and go to Harvard. It's possible in this country to grow up in a home with your grandparents where there is no toilet, where you're using the restroom in an outhouse in the era where everyone has a toilet, and you grow up to own a house with 1,000 trees in the front yard and 30 coats of paint on the wall and run a television empire. And you can succeed in any area in America, from poverty straight up to the very pinnacle of your career where you're winning a Nobel Peace Prize or experiencing the amazing feats of, sports and entertainment, science, math, entrepreneurship. You can be an adopted kid. You never know your real parents, and create a business in your parents' garage that you then drop out of college to create a empire of devices that now almost every American owns one of your devices, whether it's a laptop, computer, phone, whatever, earbuds. That's possible in this country. So to have that kind of opportunity and have Democrats grinding, specifically Black Americans, but Americans into the dust with their poorly thought out, failed policies, it's just unbelievable. And so this story to me is the hallmark of what the Democrats do. Think Progress dared to tell the truth about Bernie Sanders' hypocrisy on being a millionaire. And what did he do? He called in the cavalry. He wrote a letter to their parent organization. And now Neera Tanden, who is the leader of the Center for American Progress, has said, he wrote the letter to her, that she's calling for unity. And what's so funny is, okay, she's calling for unity, but also maligning his staff and supporters and belittling progressive ideas. Now, she's not doing that. She's not doing that, and neither are the people who are calling him on the carpet for his hypocrisy. But he wants it to stop because it makes him look bad, and it's coming from his own side. The Sanders campaign found an ally in his crusade when billionaire liberal mega donor Tom Steyer tweeted Monday that he would use his voice on the Center for American Progress's board of directors to discourage any such tax on a candidate who's seeking a Democratic nomination in the future. So just to kind of decipher that garbage, we absolutely have, a party on the left who they don't care if the person that's running for the nomination is telling the truth or not. What they care is that they present a unified front. That's the Democrats for you. All right, we have time for one quick call. Let's go to, I think it's Tommy in Ohio. Tommy, thanks for calling the show today.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on the Muslims that we've let infiltrate our country to begin with. Now we've let them infiltrate our Congress, our government, and they are enemies of Christians. And I don't know how we let them get in a country like that, wearing a robe, a black robe, and a veil over the face, so all you can see is their eyes. That seems to me like a terrorist outfit.
All right, thank you for calling. And I can understand how disturbing it is. I think one of the things that I'm interested in is any person from any land who wants to come to America and assimilate and learn our ways and be a part of our culture. You can maintain your own, identity from, your background, et cetera. Like the caller earlier said, he's an Italian American. His family hails from Italy, so they have their traditions, but they're Americans. And I think we've lost the idea that we have to do that. And part of it is because Democrats have said that's triggering, it's wrong, it's racist, it's bigoted to tell someone that when they come here they should speak English and they should want to be an American. But that used to be a given. That used to be baked into the cake. The minute you got here, you wanted to raise your kids to speak proper English so that no one could distinguish them from anyone else. Not because you were afraid, but because that was a sign that you'd finally made it in this country. You might always have an accent, but your kids never would. You wanted them to be Americans. You were an American. You were proud of it, but you wanted your kids to be the quintessential American experience, meaning they sound and behave like everyone else here. It was a sign of honor. And then when you go abroad, you're an American because instantly people can tell Americans from other people. Unbelievable that we no longer have a desire for that. Not for everyone, I should say. All right, if you're in the call queue, hang on. If you are leaving us now, God bless you from the heartland. Thank you for making your home at American Family Radio. You have onenewsnow.com. News and information up next.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. The president of France has addressed his people and the world after a massive fire destroyed part of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The French president said the entire world feels the pain from the fire.
My fellow citizens, French citizens, the fire of Notre Dame has affected the Parisians in their spirit, in their heart, It has affected the French people and the world, the entire world.
The French president vows to rebuild Notre Dame Cathedral in 5 years, but something that will not need to be replaced is a gold cross that survived the fire. If you haven't seen the pictures, just look up Notre Dame Cross on a search engine. Kate McKenna is a communications consultant based in Paris, and she tells Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk that it provides comfort in these trying times.
It was just there in the middle of the ashes, and that is something that we do need to remember as Christians and as Americans, and for the French people as well, that, you know, we're always going to face these sorts of things, and we should expect it. And, you know, God is so great and so faithful that as long as we keep our eyes turned to Him, you know, there is hope.
Investigators believe the fire was accidental. A Republican has announced plans to challenge President Trump in the race for the White House. Rachel Sutherland reports from Washington.
Bill Weld released a campaign video touting his accomplishments as former governor of Massachusetts while showcasing some of President Trump's most controversial moments.
A better America starts here. Bill Weld for president. Join us.
Weld is campaigning in New Hampshire today. In a statement, the Republican National Committee said President Trump enjoys unprecedented support among Republicans, and any effort to challenge the president's nomination is bound to go absolutely nowhere. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Well, as the debate over immigration continues to divide the country, an evangelical thought leader and seminary president says it might be a good idea to remember what makes America unique. Steve Jordahl reports.
A lot of the sting surrounding the immigration debate could be soothed if there was a way to stop illegal entry into the country and if those here legally would embrace what makes their newfound home unique among the nations. That according to Southern Seminary President Richard Land.
America is a unique country in the world. It's the only country in the world that is defined not by blood and soil, but by our commitment to an idea. And those ideas are laid out in the Declaration of Independence and in the U.S. Constitution.
He notes a couple of years ago, an AP poll found large majorities of Americans thought the country was in danger of losing her national identity and favored 3 bedrock principles.
An overwhelming majority of Americans, black, white, yellow, brown, believe that the core elements in American culture are that everyone who wants to live in this country should embrace the rule of law, the Bill of Rights, and speaking the English language.
But he says progressives in this country continue to push identity politics, which divides Americans.
If we embrace multicultural diversity to the point where we don't have that melting pot around those core values, then we're going to have absolute chaos.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Well, it's a popular tourist attraction in San Francisco, and that's the problem, according to some city leaders. Officials are concerned about overcrowding along Lombard Street, the world-famous thoroughfare that features a block-long section with 8 hairpin turns. One way being floated to get visitors to slow their roll is having them pay tolls. Officials want to set up a toll and reservation system for Lombard. It's aimed at quieting complaints by residents who say their street often feels more like an overcrowded amusement park than a residential road. In final news this hour, the U.S. Supreme Court seems inclined to rule against workers on oil drilling platforms off California who want to be paid for the off-time work they spend on the platform, including sleeping. The question for the High Court has to do with what law should apply in the case. Federal law wouldn't require drilling platform workers to be paid for off-the-clock time spent at their work location, but the more generous California law would. At arguments in the case, conservative and liberal justices seem doubtful that California law applies. Find more news now at onenewsnow.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called TuneIn. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Sir, we're not going to speculate here of the cause of something which we don't know.
Oh, no, reparations are a great idea.
If you have observations or you know something, we would love to hear it.
We had them, and it's bogus.
And renovation, what's that all about?
This issue has been brought up over and over again, and it's bogus. So anybody who says we need reparations for slavery is pretending that there was no affirmative action.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Wow. Okay, we are going to get into that discussion about reparations and so much more. Right now, let's go to the phones and chat with, we have a couple callers. Patrick in Virginia. Hey, thanks for calling the show today. Welcome to the program. Oh, I'm not hearing anything. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yes. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. This kind of what I've been listening to on the radio is that a lot of the right-wing radio hosts really seem to just ignore that French officials have said they've ruled out arson. They strongly believe it was an accident from the renovation work, which they were renovating right under this fire. It's like they really, truly want to believe it was a Muslim that did this.
Have you read the? Wait a minute, Patrick. Have you read the other stories, the other posts about the other churches all during Holy Week, leading up to Holy Week, in France that have been vandalized? And so you don't think it's reasonable for people to discuss that there may be other ideas around what happened there? The fire was in two places at the same time, so it wasn't one place and spread. The fire actually started in two separate parts of the roof at the same time, 5 minutes after they closed. And you don't think it's reasonable for people to just discuss what it could be?
I'm going with French officials, but also at the same time, in America, the past couple of weeks, we've had 3 historically black churches burned down. No mention of it on right-wing radio, but they've arrested a white supremacist.
Okay, so again, so someone's been arrested already? Wait a minute, Patrick, someone's already been arrested? So we have a resolution. So we have a resolution to those fires. So what's left to discuss? A white supremacist has been arrested. He's going to be tried for the crime, and if he's convicted, he'll pay the price for doing the vandalism to those churches, for attacking them. So what more do right-wing radio hosts need to say? Because I wonder, do you call people who are on the left, like MSNBC, CNN, do you call them left-wing TV hosts, or do you just call them TV hosts?
MSNBC would be left-wing.
But do you call them that? Because you said right-wing in a very pejorative way a number of times during this single call that you've made. You seem really obsessed with saying right-wing as if it's a bad thing. I'm happy to be on the right. The name of the show is Stacy on the Right. If you're listening to it, you know what you're getting.
Talk about right-wing radio. There isn't really that much left-wing radio.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When you refer to people who are on the left, do you call them left-wing? You don't, because you're on the left yourself, and you absolutely don't have any call to call them on their own. Patrick is a hypocrite because he would only call someone on the right wing, but he wouldn't call someone on the left wing. So he's coming from the left, and what he wants to do is have people on the right. He wants to simultaneously attack people on the right and call them on the carpet for things that he doesn't like, while giving everyone on the left a pass. And I don't think that's fair. I think Patrick should call them left wing as well. And I'm perfectly fine with him calling and asking questions or not agreeing with what I'm saying here. But shouldn't he be fair to people on the left and hold them accountable as well? Oh, I'm sorry. He can't do that because left wingers fail a lot. And if he was holding them accountable, he wouldn't have time to do anything else. That's too bad. All right, let's go to Randy in Mississippi. Hey, Randy. Thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Miss Stacy. How are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Well, don't get lost. First of all, Patrick's wrong. I learned about those 3 churches in Louisiana being burnt from right-wing radio, and it was the son of a sheriff, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, that's not why I called. Number one, I agree with your opinion. We're never going to know, especially from over there. Number 2, can you and Candace Owens run on the 2024 ticket? Are y'all old enough?
I am. She's not. She's not old enough to run. And second of all, Randy, I'm trying to get her on the show. I have not been successful.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to talk to her on the show.
God bless
I'm a
her,
fan.
too. Look, all you got to do is lie about her age and fake her birth certificate like they would on the left if she was a Democrat. That's what they do.
to
So
get her in.
Anyway, thank you for your program and bless you very much.
Thanks, Randy. I appreciate the call. So first of all, I don't want to run for president, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't either. But she possibly, maybe, so since she is so young, she's 28. If I'm correct, she's 28 years old. So that means in another 10 years, after she's finished conquering television, because she's doing the Candace Owens show on YouTube with Dennis Prager's PragerU, and she's done all these speaking engagements and stuff like that. She'll probably be ready by the time she hits the age where you have to. Oh no, wait, it's not 38. I think you have to be 45, don't you? You have to be 40? Somewhere in there. You have to be somewhere in your 40s to run for the presidency. So she's got a ways to go. But, all I'm hoping for is that at some point I get to meet her and she'll agree to come on the show. That's what I'm hoping for. So let's get into this reparations discussion. First, I want you to hear from Dr. John McWhorter. He's talking about reparations. And I rarely hear someone who is openly a Democrat, because he goes through this. The person from Reason magazine, and Reason is a libertarian organization, ask him, where do you fall politically? People call you a lot of different things. And he explains that he's a Democrat, a liberal Democrat. That's after this part of the clip. But I listened to the whole thing because I wanted to have a context with which to kind of place his ideas and what he shares about reparations. So I listened to the whole interview, and then I came back. It's like 35 or 39 minutes long. Then I came back and chose these two pieces for us to talk about here on the show. So let me give you the call lines. It's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Here's Dr. John McWhorter. He's been asked where he falls, what does he think about this idea from the Democrats, coming from Ta-Nehisi Coates and some book he wrote about reparations and how it's a key aspect of the 2020 race. It's number 4.
Oh, no, reparations are a great idea. We had them. So anybody who says we need reparations for slavery is pretending that there was no affirmative action, or that there was no Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. And I could go on and on and on. And so the question just becomes, is it that you think that those things didn't work and there need to be new reparations that would, in which case the question becomes, what do you think would work? And in this whole debate, it's considered somehow beside the point to make people specify, what do you think would work? What new policies would work? Okay, you're going to put money into certain organizations in order that they do what? And to the extent that it's considered kind of spoiling the party to ask those questions, it reveals that what we're talking about is religion. It's scriptural to say what we need is reparations. It's a variation on saying that America needs to come to terms with race without specifying what the terms are or even what you're talking about. What terms? What event, what human interaction are we referring to? You're not supposed to ask any more than you're supposed to ask about Judgment Day or the rapture. This is genuinely a religion. Now, the new idea about reparations is, well, one idea always has been, but the one that I sense people are focusing on now, is that you put money into the bank accounts of anybody who is black to make up for the wealth that was denied their ancestors.
Now, again, he says he's fine with reparations, and then he goes into this idea, and it's not just an idea; it's the truth. So different groups have had reparations given to them in different ways, from Jewish people because of the Holocaust to Japanese who were interned during the internment camps during the war, to American Indians who their reparations come in the form of the reservations and not having to pay American tax, and then you have Black Americans. What he is saying there, and he doesn't go into a long list because he's basically giving you the clue. Look it up for yourself, which I did, and it's an extensive list. Now, before you come on, call or email me and say you hate yourself because you're black and you don't want reparations, that's not it at all. First of all, I don't hate myself. Second of all, I am against reparations because it is a continuation of the idea that white people are responsible for where black people are in America today. Right? The blacks and the whites who were alive during the Civil War and directly afterwards, yes, we are the progeny of those people. If you're not a recent immigrant, if you're a black person who traces their lineage back to, the Civil War or before, or, any of that, then you know that you're descended from those people. And so you have the benefit, because I love when people talk about the negatives. I'm descended from slaves, so therefore I've only had negatives. But you're descended from slaves, so you are also one of the 40 million or so blacks in America who you don't still live on the continent of Africa. Just take a peek over there and see what's going on. First of all, you wouldn't be a Christian because most of them are Muslims. The ones who are Christians have to suffer through, it's just not even close to the experience that we have here in America. Now, they're blessed because they're alive and they get to change their destiny, as we all do here on this earth, because we have free will given to us by God. But are you telling me you'd rather that you were over there right now in 2019 instead of being here in America? I wouldn't. So the point to that is there have already been reparations for Black Americans. In addition to affirmative action, the Community Reinvestment Act, the things he mentioned, I'll just give you a few others. Forgiveness of student loan debt that's geared specifically towards Black and historically Black colleges and universities, unemployment aid, housing assistance to protect families from mortgage fraud. These are things that are geared towards the Black community. Because if you're listening to that and thinking, well, white people got that too, under different programs. But I'm talking about the stuff that's geared specifically towards Black Americans. Support for HBCUs, additional help for child care costs. This is stuff that you get if you're Black. Project-based rental assistance program, $10 billion provided by the federal government. That's an ongoing program that's still funded. Increased Pell Grants, meaning you show up Black on the application, you get more Pell Grant. There's more Pell Grant money available to you than it is if you're a white person. Housing choice voucher programs, fund to prevent hunger and improve nutrition. General assistance from the Community Development Block Grant Program, which he mentioned, and so many others. So I could sit here and just read off the programs for an hour, but that's not going to help us here, because there are people out there who hear me talking about this right now and they're thinking, well, so you're saying reparations for Black people comes in the form of government programs. Well, let's say back whenever it was the time for reparations and it was 40 acres and a mule, or, a blank check for $10,000, which back then is a king's ransom, back when we're talking about the time when reparations would have originally been paid. You're saying that these ongoing government programs, which the funding for those is up into the multiple billions, still isn't enough. And that is what the people who are asking for reparations are saying. They're saying whatever the government has already given, whatever has been paid, whatever programs have been set up, whatever affirmative action has been given, which honestly, if you look at the way affirmative action works right now, it was set up for Black Americans. Read some of Ann Coulter's writing on this. She explains it so well. It's now being used by almost every group. So it was supposed to be set up to help Blacks after Reconstruction, and it's not. It's not helping. It's not exclusively helping Black people. Actually, I think it's detrimental, because you show up to work and your coworkers think you're there because of affirmative action when you have the same educational background that they have. You have a similar work experience history or something. You beat someone out legitimately, but you show up Black and everyone just says, oh, you're affirmative action, right? So before we get to the calls, I want to listen to this last little bit. And he makes such a good point here, because I find that when I look at his other work, I disagree with Dr. McWhorter on a lot of different things. But on this particular instance, it just struck a chord with me, because he's going to walk you through how it works if they decide to write a check to every Black American who can trace their lineage back to slavery here in America. So not every Black American, but only the ones who can trace their lineage back. They write a check, and then what happens? Okay, listen to that. I hate that. Okay. When we get back, we actually have our guest, and then we will get back to this topic. You'll hear that audio. We'll take calls. Hang on. More Stacy on the right after this.
Like, I wanted to have the abortion because I was trying to hide the situation.
When a young mom in crisis walks into a preborn pregnancy center, she's welcomed with open arms and given love, support, and a free ultrasound to meet her unborn baby. This young woman not only chose life for her baby, but heard the message of Jesus Christ and was comforted from the guilt and pain that plagued her. Preborn centers lead the nation in providing free ultrasounds. When an abortion-minded woman sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and 100% of your sponsorship goes towards saving babies. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
Hello, this is Bishop Harry Jackson of Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland. Jesus said you would do greater works than he did. You and I need to understand there comes a time where you need to take those 2 old oxen that you've been riding on forever, and you feel comfortable knowing how to do this thing that you do day to day, and God's stirring something unique and different in you, and it's confirmed. Big decisions require big confirmations. It's confirmed by spiritual authorities in your life, leaders, and those who are around you that tell you and help you to understand what the will of God is. Those people say it's time to go, and you don't go. My friend, you forfeit something. Do you realize that in the book of Jonah, there's a passage there that is very powerful? It says, those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Those who cling to worthless, fruitless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. So often we won't burn the plow and give up the thing that's tangible. And God says, you know what, I've got something more for you, Harry Jackson, than you've ever thought before. I've got a place of happiness, harmony for you and your family that is better than you've ever known before. I've got a place in my will that is the safest place on the planet if you just reach out and do my will. Join us this Sunday morning at 6251 Avondale Road in Beltsville, or on the web at thehopeconnection.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. People are on the live stream talking about how the callers, whenever they call in, they sound like they're inside of a drum. And so I was just pointing out that, you know, God bless the technology, y'all. I'm live streaming to you all over the world. We have people who watch the live stream in Great Britain and Thailand and places like that. And then the syndicator is in Tupelo, Mississippi, and I'm in the Midwest. And so all of that comes together through high-speed internet, and you have a show, and people get to watch it all over and listen to it on 189 affiliates across the country, 35 states, 800 communities, and that doesn't even include the live stream audiences or the people who listen on iTunes or to the podcast at afr.net, urbanfamilytalk.com, or any of the other places like Google Play, the iTunes Store on Apple. I mean, it just sometimes it boggles my mind how we're doing all of this. And so sometimes, obviously, it sounds differently when you're listening, especially sometimes the audio is a little wonky. Sometimes it's beautiful weather outside and the internet isn't running well on the inside. So just bear with us. Always keep us in your prayers for what we're doing here, because I just think it's fantastic that we can do the kind of things we can do. And God makes that possible. And also my bosses over at AFR and Urban, Will Addison and Jim Stanley, those guys make a lot of stuff happen, cool stuff that I'm really grateful to be a part of. So I want to welcome our next guest to the program. We have Ed Condon. He's one of the editors at Catholic News Agency. Ed, thank you for taking time out with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about this real quick. I know you have multiple hits today because this story is so fresh. First off, I've been taken to task because I feel like the spate of church fires has something to do with Muslim immigration, and that may be false. It may have nothing to do with that. The French authorities are saying that this fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral actually has to do with construction. What do we know?
Well, we know that the fire seems to have originated where renovation work was ongoing, which is right around the spire of the cathedral in the roof. It's an 900-year-old wooden roof that was up there. The oaks of an entire forest, famously. So we're talking about a very flammable set of materials in a very hard-to-reach place for firefighters. So really, in that sense, it's sort of a perfect storm if you have an accident, which is very possible. But it really is too soon to say what the starting point was, whether it was accident or anything else.
All right, I can accept that. And for my part, I've been saying what I think it is, which is my opinion, which means I could be wrong, right? I don't have any evidence to support it. But I'm concerned that we saw ISIS they put out a statement saying they're celebrating it's a punishment. And I'm also concerned that there were other fires and vandalism at churches in France leading up to Holy Week. What do we know about those?
Well, actually, there have been, for about 2 months now, through February and March, there have been a spate of vandalisms and church desecrations in France, statues smashed, altars overturned. In fact, there was on the 5th of February, I think it was, there was another minor cathedral in south-central France where altar cloths were set on fire. This is something that's been ongoing in France for a number of weeks now. But again, unfortunately, we don't really know who's behind it. There hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, any public attempt to take credit for it. It's not clear whether who's behind it. If it's a coordinated campaign, if it's something that's happening more gradually and spontaneously. We really don't know. And, of course, all of this is set within a much wider context of what's been some very protracted civil unrest in France right now. The Gilets jaunes protests have not exactly been getting more relaxed as the months have gone on. Indeed, they seem to have been intensifying.
Yeah, and I saw a piece by Newsweek, one of the few I could find in American media, that actually discussed the spate of church fires that you've just outlined there. And they actually draw a connection between the vandalism in the churches in France and feminists and people who connect the church to the patriarchy and control over women by white men, anti-religion people, so they're secularists, and they're saying they're the ones who are responsible for these the lead up to the fire at Notre Dame.
Well, it's certainly possible. I'm not aware of any definitive proof one way or the other, but we certainly have seen in other parts of the world hardline secularist attacks on church buildings attempting to desecrate them or otherwise deface them. So it's certainly a possibility.
So that means we don't know anything definitively other than we know the church was it somehow lit on fire and it has been severely damaged. What do we know about the possibility of putting it back together and within, our adult lifetimes? Because if you're an adult and you're over 40, you're thinking if it takes 30 years to fix, will we even see it? Like, will we see it repaired?
Well, certainly that's the great unanswered question right now. President Macron of France has said that he hopes to see work begin as soon as possible, and he'd ideally like to see the cathedral reopened in some way, shape, or form within 5 years.
Wow.
Which seems like a very ambitious timetable for anyone who saw the images yesterday. But what we do know is that the main structure of the cathedral appears to be sound, and this is something that was by no means a foregone conclusion yesterday. There was a point where the flames were spreading to the North Bell Tower, and there was a significant concern that if the main bells were to break free or melt or fall through the fabric of the building, this could wipe out the structural integrity of the whole building. But it really does seem that despite the images we saw yesterday and the loss of the roof, the stone vault inside has largely held, and the interior of the building is largely intact.
That's what that's what's been so fascinating to me, is that in the images, the live stream of the blaze showed, the smoke billowing up taller than the Eiffel Tower, which, that's saying something. That's a mega structure that's nearby that you can see in the background as it burns. The smoke is billowing up, it's changing colors, and it just looks as if any second the entire thing is going to come down. Yet pictures from today show the interior portion at the back is burned, the gold cross remains, but the sides of the structure, even going up, there are even some candles still sitting there untouched that are mounted to the walls. And so there's no roof, but the stones that are stacked on top of each other, that obviously they're mortared together, and they're huge stones, those are sitting almost as if nothing has happened.
That's right. It's famously one of the great artistic treasures of the fabric of the cathedral itself are its 3 rose stained glass windows, which everyone almost immediately gave up as lost for sure when they saw the progress of the fire yesterday. But in fact, all 3 of them have remained intact, which is nothing short of inexplicable, unless you want to call it a miracle.
Yeah, I would.
Between the heat of the fire and then the vigorous firefighting efforts pumping thousands of gallons of water into the building, and somehow even the most delicate stained glass work has remained intact.
Yeah, I love calling it a miracle because it seems like it's something to give us hope. I'm not actually Catholic, but I think seeing the cross afterwards, one of the very first images was that the cross was still there, that they were able to save the crown of thorns, that that so much of the structure on the inside is not actually burned. And then the flying buttresses, which that's probably one of my favorite parts of the building, because that's what's so hard to actually build or create without cranes and all of our modern equipment. This is so long ago. It's really hard for us to understand the processes that they had to use to put this building together. And yet there it is. So I find it miraculous. I think it's very encouraging for us to see the fire, which hurts. It hurts to see the building burning and to think of everything that's being lost, yet afterwards to see the cross. And it's amazing.
Well, I think the other thing it shows is that when this cathedral was built in the 1200s, they set out to make a monument to God that was going to last, and it certainly has. It's now survived 2 world wars, the French Revolution, various other fairly cataclysmic conflicts in between, and now a fire that by rights should have leveled the ground. And it's endured. It's a testament not just to the God in whose name it's built, but also to the people who put the absolute best that they could into creating something that would last for all time, and it seems to have done this.
I know. That's pretty exciting. So let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned, because you had a bunch of links in your in the article that was sent to me so we could do the booking today. There were a bunch of links, and I've already been through one of them where I shared that there's this history surrounding the cathedral there. And it's again, it's so exciting to me that people are learning about it, because there kind of would be no reason for people to learn about the cathedral, but now there is because of the fire. So people are learning about it. People are thinking about the possibility of getting to go there themselves one day, maybe not anytime right away, but possibly going and visiting. And it might become a source of tourist revenue to have people coming and touring what parts they can while it is being repaired to help fund the repairs of the building. But can you give us a little bit of, I wouldn't give you a chance to state whatever you would like, because I just remembered you have a hard out in 30 seconds here. So whatever you'd like to share before you go on to your next interview.
Oh, well, thank you very much. What I would say is that this cathedral really it's the most recognizable, or one of the most recognizable in the West we have for a reason, which is it's been the heart and soul of so much of what's happened in the West for the last several centuries. I think one thing that this fire has done is it's put us back in contact with the immediacy of our own cultural history and the importance of preserving it.
So well stated. I agree, and I hope that people will continue to learn about it. Thank you so much for your time today. Ed Condon, editor of Catholic News Agency. I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. And so I was just about to launch into a whole nother spate of questions, and then I remembered he has a hard out because he has another interview that starts in 2 minutes. So I wanted to make sure and respect his time and get him out so he could do his next interview. I want to give you a little bit more. The Holy See has called for prayer as Notre Dame burns. So that was yesterday. And they have a little historical piece about the history of Notre Dame's cathedral in Paris. And I gave you a little bit of that in the first segment. I just want to mention that I'm going to post these links on the page. Again, not because I want to argue about Catholicism or any of that stuff, but because this is an opportunity to learn about a significant structure that hopefully will be repaired, and we're going to see the fruit of that. Now, we have some time left in this segment. I want to get back to our discussion on reparations, and this is where the rubber meets the road. You're going to hear him talking about this. We have enough time to listen to it, and then call lines 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And if you're wondering, if you don't get a chance to talk today, we'll still take calls on this subject tomorrow during the show and kind of keep it going. Not because my intent is not to divide us. It's to make sure that we're aware and fully capable of having this discussion, because as we get further into the presidential run-up and the primary for the Democrats with 15 people in it, and half of them are talking about reparations, we will not be able to escape this discussion. So why not go into it calmly, from a position of knowledge and not emotional based, and be able to discuss it in ways that make sense so we can articulate our position. So here is Dr. McWhorter. It's number 5.
Now, besides the ethical problems with that Glenn Loury has identified, the question has to become, this wealth goes into people's accounts, and let's say that that happens. And so there have been reparations, and there's a ceremony, and somebody cuts a ribbon, and there's some this festival, and Mary J. Blige sings, and ex-President Obama comes and makes a speech, and then he sings Amazing Grace again, and it's happened, and everybody gets up, and Mitch McConnell even says, "I'm sorry." After that happened, I wonder, and this is something I could get along with the idea that that would happen if the black intelligentsia and black political leaders and black community activists could say, after that happened, okay, we admit that we have really turned a corner. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to say that nothing else ever needs to happen, but they would have to say, wow, we have overcome. Now we've got some sweeping up to do, but Whitey is no longer on the hook. And Nick, my problem is that I don't think those people would say that. I think that the whole call for reparations is really based on emotion. It's based on a sense of identity. It's based on a sense of needing a psychological crutch because of the hole that Jim Crow and slavery and redlining left in our souls. And so I think that after the reparations happen, everybody would just be saying, the usual people, the people with 3 names, as I like to say on Blogging Heads, would say, okay, reparations was just a beginning. Upon which I'd be thinking, given that there already were reparations before, now there are these new ones and you're not happy? Or the smart take would instantly be, I think it's problematic for them to assume that they can just write a check and have it all be over, and everybody would snap their fingers. Well, if that's the way it's going to be, why do it?
And that's the question. So the only reason that many, and I'm talking about black people, Asians, whites, people who are supporting reparations, the only reason that they're supporting it, many of them, is that they want to see an end to this discussion about America being this racist country. Not that we weren't racist in the past or that we didn't have slavery as the law of the land in the past, but that the current status of America is that of some racist apartheid country. They want that characterization to go away. So they would support reparations because they think this will do it. The affirmative action didn't do it. The community reinvestment programs haven't done it. The billions upon billions of dollars of government-funded programs, that's not doing it. Having President Bush apologized, or Clinton, I think it was Clinton who apologized to America, that didn't do it. Having the first black president, didn't do it. Oprah walks among us, that's not doing it. We've had the first black attorney general, first black secretary of state, you name it, we've had it. We've had black astronauts, we've had black physicists, black people win the Nobel Peace Prize. None of that does it. Kanye West is rich, he's black, he's married to people who aren't black, they're making babies north, south, east, and west. Still not good enough. When you look at all the different things, you're like, there's got to be something that'll do it. And what he just said there is actually a central tenet to Christianity. It's what we know about human beings, which is not only are we depraved and wicked, but we're never satisfied. There is only one thing that satisfies the human heart, and that is the Savior, Jesus Christ. Reparations aren't going to fill that hole in the hearts of those who have been redlined. Reparations will not change the outlook of a person who feels they're less than because they're black. It will not change the heart of a person who's a racist and hates other people based on their skin or because they hate themselves. Reparations won't do it. The answer is always going to be Jesus Christ. So the question then becomes, why would we do it? And who would pay for it? Someone just asked me, would we pay for our own reparations if we got them? Because if it comes from taxpayer sources, we all pay into that. Would only white people be forced to pay? How would they choose which white people? These are the kind of questions that are a waste of our time. I'm still willing to talk about this, obviously. Next segment, perfect time, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Be right back.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
I'll be honest, sometimes I fight that tendency to allow my tongue to have its way. It's easy to say, "Oh, you're crazy," or "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
Hurtful words can be painful, no matter who they come from. But when they come from your spouse, the person you love the most, they can hurt even more.
And when they do, here's the key thing I want everyone to hear. I have to go to Lauren or the kids and say, "I shouldn't have said that. I was wrong and I'm sorry." When you can acknowledge your failures, say you were wrong and apologize, that's the sign of a winner in my book.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Pastor Joseph Parker.
You know, obviously when things are going well, it's much easier to have an attitude of thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. But even when things are going difficult, it's important to know, too, there's never a time it's inappropriate for us to thank and praise God. Now, some may ask, well, what about when you're going through difficult times, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? We can have two different responses. We can worship or we can whine.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk. Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Marnita from The Marnita Show with Parenting Points. Ready for promotion or not? As children grow and develop, be careful not to reward them with the blessing before they are mature enough to handle it. When they are ready for the next level in life, they will exhibit behavior that is indicative of next level living. For example, you don't go to college until you finish high school, right? Children want to test the waters of their next level before they can actually manage it. They don't know that they're not ready. When they ask for their car on Saturday night, but don't normally follow your clear, simple instructions, you can reasonably assume they have a plan B. Instead of bailing them out of trouble, wait until their behavior warrants a promotion. Be the rock that's not movable by their emotions.
For more parenting, tune in to The Marnita Show, right here on your favorite station.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The Born Alive Abortion Survivor Protection Act says that a baby who survives the abortion must receive immediate medical care and be admitted to a hospital. Do you believe that denying such care constitutes infanticide?
You know, this issue has been brought up over and over again, and it's bogus in terms of how our Republican friends are interpreting this. Infanticide is against the law, and a woman has a right to decide what is her choice with her doctor before that moment, before the child is born. So this is all just, again, fear-mongering and falsification of what is actually happening. Infanticide is already illegal.
Well, that's Chucky Schumer, and he's right, it's illegal, but it's no longer illegal in the state of New York. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't that where he's from? So what is he talking about? Like, I don't get him, he was rearing up there a little bit. He had his back up. He's like, well, it's already illegal, except in New York. So how about that? How about you discuss that? How are you okay with that? He's uncomfortable with it because he knows, had you asked him about this 20 years ago, he would have said no Democrat supports that. And now that they do, he has to adjust himself. And that's what's happening over on the left. They're running, trying to keep up with the march to the left, which has now become a full-blown sprint, single payer, taking money from people who've already earned it under the guise of wealth redistribution, unwavering belief in climate change, regardless of what other scientists say. The idea that religious freedom hinges upon the sexual habits of certain Americans. These kinds of ideas are being trumpeted by the left. And their elected officials are having to race to catch up with it. And I got no problem with you. You believe what you want to believe, espouse what you want to espouse, but stop lying about it. Be open about your support of infanticide. Don't act like it's not something that's been trumpeted by Governor Ralph Northam, and he's still in office, completely untouched. He should have been drummed out of office by Christian Democrats. Yeah, I said it. Where are you? You have no compunction about this man sitting in office that you elected, talking about laying a baby under a warming tray and the mother and the doctor deciding what to do with it. You have no compunction about that? Please don't think you're going to get away with silently condoning him being in office, serving over you after he admitted that that's what he wants to do. You won't get away with it. None of us are going to get away with anything. Every single one of us will have to account for every moment, every word, every thought, every deed. Whatever doesn't fall under the blood, meaning it's been repented and turned away from, will have to be accounted for. And that guy, he's your guy. And you are condoning what he said. You're condoning what he wants to pass in Virginia. And those in New York, you are now a part of it because it passed and you didn't revolt. You didn't do anything. You just sat back with your hands folded, with your lips pressed together. Well, we have to support Planned Parenthood. Good luck explaining that at the judgment seat. Good luck with it. So, wrapping up our conversation about reparations, and maybe you feel like I already did. I know it's a touchy subject with some people. My discussing it today on the show, we have to not be touchy about it, right? We have to not be on the right. The big stereotype about people on the right is whenever you say anything about race, people on the right get up in arms and they get all sensitive in their feelings. They don't want to talk about it. And I don't think that's accurate for everyone. It's obviously it's a stereotype, meaning rooted in some negative truth, but doesn't apply to everyone. But we have to be stronger than that. First of all, race is a construct. We are all human beings, and ethnic backgrounds are real, meaning you come from a specific area of the world or area of a country or area of a continent, and you have certain characteristics. So in other words, you come from a certain tribe of humanity, and that there are certain stereotypes that are applicable to certain tribes of humanity, but there are always cultures that can change the trajectory of any group of people. Look at people who come from one part of the world that's unsuccessful. They come to America and they become wildly successful. So it's when they adopt American cultural norms that they find their way to success. Also, being in a country that has a lot of freedom and liberty that's constitutionally protected means they don't have to worry about, offending this official or offending that official's child or running afoul of this one or that one by not paying them a bribe, which means they're free to create and to do things. So all of that being said, the discussion around reparations doesn't have to be an emotional roller coaster or something that splits people apart. The questions that I would say I would love to have answered by anyone from Ta-Nehisi Coates to any of the Democratic candidates who are currently saying reparations, reparations, reparations. Who pays the reparations? How do you decide who gets the reparations? What happens after the reparations are paid? Are white Americans then free to go about living their lives, or do they forever have to wear the stain of being white and that whites owned people in this country historically, many, many, many moons ago? And does this satisfy the need for certain white liberals to feel superior to other white people because they advocate for these kinds of policies? Does everyone kind of reset and go back to ground zero? Those are genuine questions that you can ask someone who is saying they want reparations. You can also ask them, if you happen to be not permanently tan, meaning you tan some parts of the year, but you're not at this very moment coming out of winter, you'd have no tan. If you're in that situation, you could say to the person who might be permanently tanned, do you want the reparations to be paid from every white person or just those who can trace their lineage to slavery? That's a good question to ask. It not only will show you where that person's coming from, but it will also give you an opportunity to have a discussion about the fact that we have a very few people in this country who are directly descended from people who owned slaves. So again, you're trying to find that person's true north, whether they're advocating for it because they just want to punish white people, or this is just another step in the cog of never-ending race division that will never be satisfied. Have you ever been in a situation like that with someone where you're genuinely trying to work through a problem and that person just will never be satisfied. And the further into it you get, you're making concessions, you're trying to, you've apologized, you've made concessions, you're even willing to do some things to show you have a good faith effort in trying to fix the situation, and they just keep piling on. And then rewinding back to the moment where you made the mistake and saying, because you did so-and-so. If you've ever been in that, you realize at some point you're in a no-win situation. You'll never satisfy this person. They're like an empty pit. You can keep tossing gold coins and money and your time and your energy into it. You could throw yourself into it, and you'll just keep falling forever because there's no bottom. The people who are espousing this need for reparations, in my opinion, are in that place because they cannot answer the question, will this be enough? They know if they say no, then most of us will say, well, then we don't want reparations. I don't want people who are white to think that they owe me something when they've never owned slaves and I've never been a slave. And I don't want the division that comes along with it because we have such other huge problems to tackle. Imagine if liberals spent the same amount of time researching things that work for, let's say, inner cities and started implementing policies, regardless of where they came from, in inner cities to try to help people actually thrive, to help them flourish. Not government programs that say you come into this office once a month and we'll give you, we'll pay you, we'll put money on this card. No, not that stuff. The stuff that actually makes people more free. What if they did that instead of spending so much time and energy just wasting precious minutes, hours, and days on a discussion about reparations? You heard Dr. John McWhorter say he'd love to get a check for $50,000 for nothing but being black. And when he said it, and I listened to it this morning, I actually laughed and I thought, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't love to get a check for 50 grand? And some math whiz out there can do the math. 38 to 40 million blacks, let's say everybody who's black, you're just black, you permanently tan, you get the check. And every one of them gets $50,000 bucks. It's a lot of money. Where does it come from? And then what about the other groups? I saw someone pointing out that the first slaves were actually the Irish, and the Irish never received any reparations. And they don't ask for them either. In fact, the Irish have just given us a great holiday, St. Patrick's Day, where most people who practice that holiday actually spend the time drinking and eating wings and enjoying themselves. And, more power to you. I don't even care about people getting mad because I'm saying they're enjoying that holiday. But the point is, there are other groups who could say, well, you know what? Reparations bandwagon is pulling out. I think I'm going to jump on there. I think I'm going to hitch my trailer to that wagon and get on there because I want some reparations too. The taxpayers are the ones who will fund it. There's no magic, reparations daddy in the sky who's going to pour out money that doesn't come from American taxpayers. And then what do you do with the resentment and the anger that's going to come from that? People who had nothing to do with slavery paying for the sin of slavery to people who were not slaves. Whatever the negative ramifications of redlining and the subpar educational options and things that happened during the Jim Crow era and times in this country where Americans didn't treat their brethren the best, there are so many other people who have experienced negative ramifications from you name it on down the line. But I guess that just negates the power of God in our lives, the power for us to be able to say, you know what? So I come from this background, but God says I have the mind of Christ and I can do all things through him. And I'm speaking particularly to our Christian audience. If we think that the fix is just a check from the government called reparations payment, then, what are we doing on Wednesday nights and Sundays in church? Or if you go on Saturday, what are you doing there? If the whole fix for everything that's wrong with Black America is a check from the federal government, then why are so many of us going to church? Why are so many of us honestly seeking God's face for healing, for blessings, for anointing, for new ideas, for new opportunities, for all the different things that we pray for healing in our communities, for people to be brought to salvation, for kids who have, ailments to be healed, all the things we're praying for. Why are we even doing that if all we need is a check from the government? And I know if you're listening to that, you might say, well, we could do both. You can pray to God and you can also get a check from the government for reparations. But then what? I don't see anything good coming out of it. And I also, I just look at lottery winners, and some people might say that's not a good analogy, but look at how many, I mean, it's so easy to find. I remember the kids talking about the jackpot had gotten really huge here in Missouri. And the kids were like, Mom, have you bought a ticket for that? Because you could win, you know. I was like, I don't play the lottery. And they're like, why? And I said, well, it's a game of chance, and the Bible tells us not to gamble. But even if you don't believe that, and it's lawful for you because you don't think that that's a sin for you, look at what happens to people when they win the lottery. And so our son, you know, he pulls his iPad out, he pulls up lottery winners, and after a few clicks, he had stories. Some of them are just list form, where it'll say the top 10 lottery winners in the year so-and-so, where are they now? And 8 out of 10, sometimes 9 out of 10 of them are all broke or in a worse situation than they were before they won the lottery. And so you might say, well, what does that have to do with you? I'm not saying we would be in a worse situation, but the money doesn't bring joy to most of the people who win it. And if you're already poverty stricken and you get a check for 50 grand from the government, you don't have any money management skills, you're not going to have that 50 grand for very long. And then what? Reparations part 2? You know, then it's some other reason why the government should be cutting checks to us. The sooner we're able to have cogent conversations with people who are seeking reparations and get them to understand that that's just it's like having a huge gash in your arm and putting a little Band-Aid over it. You don't need a Band-Aid. You need a surgeon who is skilled at stitching things shut, installing stitches, and cleaning and debriding wounds to keep you from getting infected, and prescribing antibiotics. You do not need a Band-Aid. That's what the reparations are like. It's like there's this huge gash, and they're like, let us put a little, you know, we got these Band-Aids. They're pretty. They have Rugrats images on them. Some of them have SpongeBob. Let us put I know that wound looks huge, but just hold it together, and we'll one Band-Aid should do it. Not even close. Reparations will not solve what is aching within the hearts of people who are begging for it. And for some people, it's an ache, it's an empty hole, and for other people, it's anger, it's rage. They want to lash out at anybody to make those people responsible for their life situation. The only person who's responsible for the life situation you find yourself in is you. And that's hard to accept. It's hard to deal with. We all face it regularly. You make a mistake and you're like, man, how did I do that? And deep down you're like, oh, this is so-and-so's fault. And then if you have any maturity, you deal with yourself and you say, actually, it's not that person's fault, it's my fault. I did this. I'm going to have to fix it. That is the conversation that we're going to have to start having with people. Not out of anger, but out of a desire to get a true understanding of what people think is actually going to happen if the U.S. government gives out reparations. And the sooner we can get done with that, the sooner we can get back to discussing policy. And I know there are plenty of Democrats who will never discuss policy, and that's fine. I don't have time for those people. But there are those out there who really want to see some improvements and changes in the lives of Americans, and we can make that happen. But it's just time for the grown-ups to start having these conversations. And I think Dr. John McWhorter, I disagree with him on a lot, but he articulated this well. I will post the link to the entire Reason interview on Facebook and YouTube and let you, definitely take a look at it and see what you think. All right. Thanks for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Be back with you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not